Hey students, it's Miss Maples here with the video going over the Declaration of Independence and walking you through annotating it. Please do not feel like you have to copy my annotations. In fact, don't do that. I just know that this is a difficult text, and so maybe watching me work through, thinking through it, discussing it, and annotating it will help you. So, the Declaration of Independence was drafted by Thomas Jefferson, although it was signed by all of the men in the Continental Congress on July 4th, 1776. The purpose of the letter was to break up with England, to break up with the monarchy and basically assert ourselves as our own nation, the United States of America. And we were trying to explain to King George why we were doing it, what was wrong with how he was leading and his monarchy. It was also to all the people of England because they would be fighting in this war. If it went to war, then the U.S. is going to be fighting against relatives, right? People from where they migrated from. And then the world that's watching. This is a founding document of a new nation. And so this is also asserting who these men were saying we are as a nation and kind of asserting that we were right in the breakup. We were right to break up with King George. So kind of keep all of that in mind as you're reading. As you annotate, you want to write your personal reactions to what you read, questions you have, definitions of words you don't know, and there will probably be quite a few definitions that you don't know because of the way that it's written. Any references or allusions you don't know, if there's something brought up and you're like, yeah, I have no clue what he's talking about, look it up. You can use the Explore when you right-click or double-click. You can do Explore and search the web. You can also right-click or double-click and do Define to look up a definition. It makes it really easy. And then you can just copy and paste what you found straight into your comment for your annotation. If you find ethos, pathos, or logos, either mark it with a comment and say, hey, I think this is pathos, or I think this might be ethos. I think that Thomas Jefferson is persuading that we are right in breaking up with Britain by doing this, this, and this. Or you can use a color coding system. So like I was going to do yellow for ethos, red for pathos, and green for logos. Okay. So that's how I'm going to mark it. You can choose to do it however you want. And I'm just going to give you a brief overview of the document. The first 4 paragraphs is an introduction to the argument, basically setting up their stance, like what our rights are, what the rule of government is, and we're breaking up with you, King George, because you keep on doing us wrong. We have no choice. Paragraphs 5 through 31 is a list of grievances. It's a long list of all the stuff that King George has done wrong that has led to this breakup. So it's like if you were breaking up with your significant other at Starbucks and you whipped out your phone where you had a list of notes of like, you want to know why? Here's why. That's basically what this list is. Only a lot more serious stuff, I hope, than a relationship breakup. So we're going to skip a lot of that list because it's so long. And then there's a couple paragraphs explaining all the things that the colonists did to try to fix things with the king. And then he just kept ignoring it. And then paragraph 34 is the conclusion, basically wrapping it all up and officially declaring independence from England, saying we are now the United States of America. We are not a part of England anymore. We are not under your monarchy deal. And of course, the way King George ended up doing that was waging war. But the U.S. won. So Revolutionary War turned out in our favor. So follow along, listen, annotate. Hopefully it helps you. If you only need a certain part, scroll through the video to find what you need. Okay. In Congress, July 4th, 1776, unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America. Unanimous, saying we're all in this together. Paragraph 3 is a long sentence, so I'm going to kind of focus you on the parts you need to know. So the sentence is a whole paragraph long. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. So I've highlighted the beginning and end of that sentence because that's what you need to focus on. Basically, Thomas Jefferson is writing, when one nation needs to break free of another nation, okay, right here, they need to declare the causes. You don't just break up without saying why, okay? So if you have to dissolve the political bands with the nation, you need to declare the causes. And he's like, all right, we will do it. We're going to tell you why we're going to break up with you, Britain. So feel free to write any notes. Pause if you need. Paragraph 4. This is the part that you all have heard before. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So you might choose to write something like, I've heard this before, and then maybe something like, also, didn't these men own slaves? Hypocritical much? Right? If they're asserting that all men are created equal and they were given those the rights to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness from the Creator, from God, then isn't it pretty hypocritical to then enslave humans? I think really these men are kind of like hoping that that will be overlooked historically. Also, they basically meant white men that have enough money to own property are who they're focused on. They're not so worried about women or anyone of color. That's the hypocrisy of this document, right? So you can certainly write your ideas about that. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. So this is saying that governments get their power from the people. So if they aren't serving their people, kind of ... Okay, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive to these ends, meaning life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. So this is the kind of the important part here. If the people aren't being properly served, rights protected by government, it is their right to change or get rid of it. I feel like paragraph 4, I'm just going to write a little note. I think paragraph 4 is presenting a pretty logical argument. I think there's a lot of logos involved here. Persuading audience that they are right in leaving King George's monarchy because he is infringing on their God-given rights. So I think it's a logical argument, but I think you can also mark a couple other things. By bringing up the creator, you could certainly say that this is hitting on ethos and appeal to morality or religion. And I think you're going to see some places where he uses some really strong negative connotation of words and strongly positive connotation of words, like life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. I think he chooses really strong words in order to create an emotional response. Like, oh, that's really good, and what King George is doing is really bad. So I think you can make some arguments for areas of paragraph 4 where there is ethos being used and areas where there is pathos being used. Okay. Okay, so moving on from prudence. So prudence means being careful, not acting rashly, really thinking through what you are doing, being cautious. So cautiousness will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes. And accordingly, all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer, while evils are sufferable, than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. This part's saying that you don't just overthrow a government that's been around a long time because they just made you mad. It's not over something small, okay? And most of the time, mankind is more disposed to suffer. People often suffer under corrupt government. I mean, look around. It's not like people just overthrow governments all the time, okay? So he's saying we are being prudent. It's not like we're just trying to overthrow a government for a small reason. But, so he's saying there are times you have to overthrow the government. So, but when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. He's saying when there's a bunch of abuses and they're really bad ones, despotism, if we want to look that word up, remember you can highlight, double click or right click, define. It means the exercise of absolute power, especially when it's cruel. That's what he's calling the king right here. That is a strongly negative word. You could certainly say that has pathos, right? It's going to stir up emotions in the audience, either anger or distrust of the king. So he's saying when a king is like that, or when a government is like that, it is the right and duty. It's not just a right, it's their duty to make life better and to throw off such a government for future security. What about the kids, right? What about the next group of people? We have to make things better. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. So saying that King George, his history with us is repeated injuries. He has hurt us over and over again, and he is a tyrant, which is a very negative word, right? Negative connotation. Saying, we got to get rid of this guy. He cannot be our leader. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. So get ready for a long list of grievances, King George. Here's all the reasons that you are an awful leader. We're not going to go over all of them because it's a ridiculously long list. They really wanted to stick it to him. He has refused to assent to laws, the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. He won't allow laws to be created that are actually going to help people. He has forbidden his governors to pass laws of immediate and pressing importance, unless suspended in their operation till his assent should be obtained, and when so suspended, he has utterly neglected to attend to them. So when people are saying, King George, we need these laws, they're important, he's like, yeah, we'll deal with it later, and then he just neglects them. Okay, so we're starting out small. Those aren't, you're like, yeah, that sounds bad, but they're not that bad. Excuse me. More and more. Here we go. You'll see the difference here at the end. You don't start with the big complaints. You start small and you get big. If you're breaking up with someone, you're like, it was really annoying that you would always leave your socks on the floor, but you end with like, you lied to me all the time, right? You save the big things for last, structurally. So that's what happens here. Right, paragraph 27. He has abdicated government here, meaning he hasn't taken responsibility, by declaring us out of his protection and waging war against us. That's a pretty big deal. King George is like, yeah, I'm not going to protect you guys. P.S. I'm also going to wage war against you. What kind of government is that? Okay. He has plundered our seas, ravaged our coast, burnt our towns, and destroyed the lives of our people. Dang. It's getting serious now. They're not messing around. I'd say that this is really where some pathos is coming in too. Trying to create some emotion, probably wanting some anger from King George, and also maybe people looking around and going, guy's bad. He's plundering your seas and burning your towns. Yeah, you probably should break up with him. He is at this time transporting large armies of foreign mercenaries to complete the works of death, desolation, and tyranny, already begun with circumstances of cruelty and perfidy scarcely paralleled in the most barbarous ages, and totally unworthy of the head of a civilized nation. He's sending armies over to kill us. And he's been cruel. He has been deceitful. He's worse than, like, go back in time when they used to, like, you know, burn people at the stake and send people into a ring against bears, like really bad, old, barbarous stuff. They're basically saying, King George, that's what you are. You're not civilized. So they're really slinging some mud at King George. King George is probably real angry. Paragraph 30, he has constrained our fellow citizens, taking captive on the high seas to bear arms against their country, saying that he has taken American colonists captive when they're on the seas and then made them fight against their own people. It's pretty gruesome stuff. To become the executioners of their friends and brethren, or to fall themselves by their hands. They see how it's getting real intense. He has excited domestic insurrections among us. Domestic means at home. They're going to claim that King George has made Native Americans or Indians fight against them. And he uses a really negative word, savages, which makes me like, you're really going to call them savages? They're not the ones owning slaves, but, you know. But they're going to claim that King George has made Native Americans fight against the colonists. He has excited domestic insurrections amongst us and has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our frontiers, the merciless Indian savages. Look in the mirror, guys. Whose known rule of warfare is an undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions. I don't know about that paragraph, but trying to claim that the evil savages have been turned against them by King George. Not so sure about that. All right. So now we've moved on from the list of grievances. Now we're on to the part where he is going to bring up, here's what the colonists did to try to fix it. They didn't just break up right away. They tried to go to therapy. They tried to work it through. And here are the different things that they did. In every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress, meaning remedy. They've tried to have the king fix it in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. So every time they said, hey, can you help us out, King George? He was like, yeah, no, I'm just going to keep doing bad stuff. Peace. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to be ruler of a free people. Straight up saying, King George, you're a tyrant, which means you rule with complete authority and you just run us over and you don't care. You are not fit to be our ruler. You are not fit to lead us. So we're not going to let you anymore. Nor have we been wanting in attention to our British brethren. We have warned them from time to time of attempts by their legislature to extend an unwarrantable jurisdiction over us. We have reminded them of their circumstances of our emigration and settlement here. I'm not saying this isn't just King George. We've also tried to talk to other British people to say, hey, this is not going well. That hasn't worked out either. We have appealed to their native justice and magnanimity, and we have conjured them by the ties of our common kindred to disavow these usurpations, which would inevitably interrupt our connections and correspondence. They too have been deaf to the voice of justice and of consanguinity, which means brotherhood. We're of the same blood. We're from the same people. So it's not just the British king that has ignored us. It's the British people, right? They're also in the audience of this letter. They have not tried to help us out. They haven't gone and said, hey, King George, this isn't going to end well for us if we don't work with the colonies. No one helped. We must therefore acquiesce, which means go along with, the necessity which denounces our separation and hold them, as we hold the rest of mankind, enemies in war, in peace, friends. Those are some strong words. It's saying, yeah, I know we're like brethren, we're family, we're from the same bloodline, all the people in Britain where we've migrated from, but you guys are part of this monarchy and you didn't try to help us, so we're waging war against you too, right? If we go to war, we're fighting you. It gets real intense there. Here's the conclusion where they actually say their independence. We, therefore, the representatives of the United States of America in General Congress assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for rectitude of our intentions, do in the name and by the authority of the good people of these colonies solemnly publish and declare, lots of words, here's the part that matters, that these united colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved. It's done. We are never, ever getting back together. It's over. Okay? And that since we're free and independent states, right, we have the full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish our own commerce, and to do all other acts and things which independent states may of right do. We are now, as of this moment, declaring our independence. We are saying we are our own nation. We are going to make our own rules, our own laws, have our own commerce and trade. We can levy war just like you can. We are on our own now. And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protect of the divine providence, calling out to God, right? Saying, I know you're on our side. You know, we're doing the right thing here, so I know that you're on our side, God. We mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor, saying, as colonists, we are forming this nation and we are pledging to each other to support one another in this endeavor. And they sent this off with a bunch of signatures to King George. So I hope this helped you understand the Declaration of Independence, and we will be working with this further. You'll be writing a letter kind of mimicking the style of this. You'll also be writing a sus paragraph analyzing it, so make sure you understand this piece. All right. Bye, everybody.